I would like to start to present the first speaker of today. So please welcome Petter Viksveen.
Thank you very much, Birgitta, and thank you for inviting me to come here. It's been a great pleasure, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to present this little piece of research. So this is a presentation on economic evaluations of homeopathy. It's the results of a review which we carried out, which was published in the European Journal of Health Economics earlier this year. And I'd like to express my gratitude to the other two authors, Zofia Demetre from the United Kingdom and Dr. Stephen Simmons from Belgium. Before we go into the review, I'd like to draw your attention to this article on the use of economic evaluations in national health service decision-making. The authors of this article stated that the central problem addressed by the discipline of economics is that of resource scarcity. And so the purpose of economic analysis is to help decision makers when addressing problems arising due to the scarcity issue. So we all know there are limited resources which national governments have to distribute, and they have to make some very difficult decisions. And the authors go on by stating that cost-effectiveness analysis has moved to the center ground of national policy NHS considerations in England and Wales. So they're using cost-effectiveness analysis to make these difficult decisions. Another article published just recently, the authors state that the cost-effectiveness of therapies is a major criterion when allocating scarce public resources. So, but are health economic evaluations of importance only to these stakeholder groups, to the government-established bodies? Well, I would argue that it is of relevance to many other stakeholder groups. Is it, for instance, not of importance to an individual to know, for instance, if you want help with your asthma or your rheumatism, to know whether one treatment is more cost-effective than another? And for employers, it's certainly of interest to know whether treatments can affect sick leave rates or productivity. And insurance companies offering private health insurance are most certainly interested in the economic analysis. So when first preparing this presentation, I did a quick search of the internet to see what people are saying about the cost-effectiveness of homeopathy. And here is a small selection of what I found. Homeopathy is cost-effective. It is one of the most cost-effective medical treatments available. And studies indicate that homeopathy helps contain medical costs both for doctors and patients. And these kind of statements have not only been made about homeopathy, they're also made in conventional medicine, and they're even using scientific research to do so. And in the article that I showed you just a little while ago, that was recently published on undue industry influences that distort health research, strategy, expenditure, and practice, the authors state that studies funded by industry are more likely to report ratios below required threshold on cost effectiveness, and studies funded by industry are more than twice as likely to report cost-effectiveness ratios below $20,000 per quality-adjusted life year compared with studies funded by other sources. So basically what this is saying is that studies funded by the industry, carried out by the industry, carries bias. So there we go. So it's not just homeopathy. What does the existing evidence tell us about the cost-effectiveness or economic evaluations of homeopathy? So this brings me now to our review. And when we carried out this review, we defined some criteria for which types of studies that we would include. And we've included economic evaluations of homeopathy in humans, so we excluded animals, and studies contrasting with a comparator for cost or consequences. So this means if a study did not report the consequences or the costs, it was automatically excluded. We included articles published in peer-reviewed journals only, and we excluded Congress abstracts because they contain too little information to make a proper evaluation. We searched these sources, fairly known databases, AMED, the Cochrane Library, CRD, Embase, Medline, and if you do not already know it, the journal Homeopathy, of which Dr. Peter Fischer is the editor, you should subscribe to it or read it. It's a really, really good source for high-quality homeopathy research. This is a flow chart. I'm not going to go into details into this, but just to show you, you can find it also in the article, the flow of our search strategy. And what I want to draw your attention to here is that we identified 500 titles which were potentially, possibly relevant. And then we ended up with 15 it says studies which were included in our review, which fulfilled the inclusion criteria. It's actually not 15 studies, it's 14 studies, but they're reported on in 15 articles. So there was one study which was reported on in 2 articles. We've pointed out in our article that this was not a systematic review. It was suggested at the Barcelona conference that maybe we were too modest. Anyhow, this is what we ended up with. There were a number of reasons for it, among other things, the way in which we analyzed the data we had collected. It is possible that additional unidentified studies may exist. Previous authors, such as Karen Pilkington and Kogo, have pointed out that when you carry out a systematic review in complementary and alternative medicine, you need to use a broad range of databases. And I've just recently carried out a systematic review of homeopathy in depression, which we're hoping to publish sometime over the next months. And we found exactly that. We used 28 databases, and we found that many of the studies we identified were found only in one individual database or source. So, but to our best knowledge, a higher number of economic evaluations has not been reported previously. So, let's take a look at the 14 studies that we included. 11 compared homeopathy with other treatments, 1 compared to placebo, and 2 studies reported on results from before to after homeopathic treatment. So there was no other comparator group. The number of participants was reported in 13 out of 14 of these studies and added up to a total of about 3,500 patients, with a median of 97, and you see the interquartile range here, and the range from 18 up to 1,182 patients. In 9 of these articles, the authors also reported on the number of participants in the control group, and that adds up to over 152,000 patients. Very high number of participants. And as you see here, the median was only 57, and this very high number is due to one study which included almost 152,000 patients in the comparator group. 12 were cost-effectiveness analysis, 1 was a cost minimization analysis, and 1 a cost utility analysis. What I've done here is, in the article, you will find a table with each individual study, where each study is described, and I've tried to develop an abbreviated version of it, just to give you an overview of the types of studies that were included in our review. So you see the first 6 studies here with a range of complaints: osteoarthritis, dental surgery, otitis, sinus infections, dyspepsia, and 1 study with patients suffering from various types of complaints. And the interactions, the homeopathy interactions, were also a variety of types of interactions: complex homeopathic injections. There's another complex remedy. Arnica was used in 1 study, and 2 studies used individualized homeopathy. And as you see there, the second last one, the authors didn't specify the homeopathy approach. And the same goes for the comparator. There were mostly conventional treatments, but also a range of different types of approaches. And the results were reported in a variety of ways. I'm not going to go into details. It's just so you get like an idea that there were quite a wide range of different types of outcome measures. Next 5 studies on diabetic neuropathy, 1 on asthma in children and 1 on ear, nose, throat infections in children, and 2 studies reporting on patients suffering from various types of complaints. The interactions were either individualized homeopathy, or the authors did not report on the homeopathy approach. And the control groups here were either conventional treatment, or they assessed results from before homeopathic treatment to after homeopathic treatment, so no other comparator group. And again, a wide variety of different types of outcomes. Read the details in the article. The last 3 studies, 1 on eczema in children, 2 on patients with various types of complaints, all 3 of individualized homeopathy comparing to conventional medicine, and again, a range of different types of outcome measures. So, can we try to summarize these results? The overall results were that we found 8 studies which showed improvements in patients' complaints, in homeopathy patients, and lower costs in the homeopathy group. In 4 studies, we found results which were at least as good as controls at similar costs. And in 2 studies, we found clinical results which were comparable to control, but at higher costs. So this all seems very promising, but there is a but. As you already saw, there was a wide range of different types of complaints, 5 studies reporting on patients suffering from various types of conditions, 4 reporting on respiratory or ear, nose, throat problems, and then the remaining studies each reported on 1 clinical condition. A range of methodologies were also used: randomized controlled trials, cohort studies, case series, and a number of uncontrolled methodologies. The outcome measures, you also again see a wide range of types of outcomes: symptom severity, some focused on pain, some focused on mortality. And the time horizon ranged from 12 hours all the way through to 9 years, with the majority of studies, 9 studies, reporting on results from 3 to 12 months. And I'd like to point out here that results were not less promising after longer than shorter time periods. 6 studies reported on homeopathic treatment provided either by a single practitioner or a single clinic. 7 reported on more than 1, ranging from 4 to 101 homeopaths, and 1 study did not report the number of practitioners or clinics. 8 studies reported on individualized homeopathy, 3 on non-individualized homeopathy, and 3 did not report the homeopathy approach that was used. Here, I'm going to present you 3 examples now. The first one is by Slade, published in 2004. This is a prospective case series assessing the cost-effectiveness of treatment provided by a single homeopath, a doctor practicing homeopathy. The homeopathy approach was not reported. He treated 97 patients suffering from various types of complaints. The outcome measure was MIMOP scores. I don't know if that's an outcome that you're familiar with. It's a Measure Yourself Medical Outcome Profile. And this very long title basically means it's a 1 A4 sheet where patients fill in the 2 most bothersome symptoms, and then they rate how bothersome it is at that particular moment in time. And then they can do that from consultation to consultation. It's a very useful tool which you should consider if you're a practitioner using in your everyday practice. You can monitor what's happening, and you can also report the results later. The time horizon was 12 months, and the results showed significant improvements in MIMOP scores. Cost savings at about $250 per patient per year were found. You see here I've used US dollars. What we did in the study is we converted the currencies, all currencies, into US dollars because that makes it easier for people to compare the different studies. And also we accounted for inflation rates, and we used then the 2012 rate presented as US dollars, so you can compare the different studies. Weaknesses is, of course, that this is an uncontrolled study. There's no comparator group. It's not a randomized study. Only medication costs were presented, and we all know that the main cost in homeopathic treatment is not the drug, but it is the consultation. And this was also results reported only from a single practice. So that makes it difficult to generalize results. Second study is by Claudia Witt and her team, published in 2005, comparative parallel group cohort study assessing the cost-effectiveness of individualized homeopathy provided by 101 doctors practicing homeopathy, treating 265 patients suffering from various types of complaints, and then comparing the results to a control group of 228 patients who were then treated by conventional medicine. They reported direct healthcare costs including medication, consultations, hospital care, and physiotherapy care. So a wider range of different types of costs than the previous study. They did not report non-healthcare costs. The outcome was symptom severity, and the time period here was 12 months. The results showed, as assessed by patients, the symptom severity was better in the homeopathy group compared to the conventional group, and as assessed by doctors, the homeopathy group was better for children. The children group was better, but for adults there was no difference. And overall there was also no difference as rated by the GPs. Quality of life was better in the homeopathy group at 6 months, but not at 12 months. Costs were similar. Weaknesses, there were no non-direct and non-healthcare costs reported. There is a risk of bias in the study, and a small sample was used for the cost analysis. The third and last example I'm going to present to you here now is Koreman and Barr's study carried out in the Netherlands, published in 2010, a cohort study reporting on the cost effectiveness of treatments, including 28 doctors practicing homeopathy, treating 1,182 patients suffering from a variety of complaints, and then comparing results to almost 52,000 patients treated by doctors practicing conventional medicine only. They reported direct healthcare costs, including GP costs, hospital costs, medication, and paramedic costs, and the outcome was mortality, and the time period was 4 years. The results showed reduced mortality and 15% lower costs, which was due to reduced costs for medication and hospital stays. So sounds promising. Weaknesses are that this is data from one health insurance only. No non-direct healthcare costs were reported, or non-healthcare costs were reported, and there is potential for self-selection bias. So the authors themselves pointed out that it is possible that homeopathy patients are more health conscious, and that is why mortality is reduced. So overall, the studies were highly heterogeneous, which makes it difficult to summarize the results. And it makes it difficult to generalize results. So it's difficult to say something certain about how this would look in other populations. They were mostly of low methodological quality, and what we mean by this is that there was either uncertain or high risk of bias. And various types of bias, and small sample sizes were used, or no sample size calculation had been carried out beforehand. In the conclusion section of our article, we've then repeated the main results, and then we have added that studies were highly heterogeneous and most had methodological limitations, and it is therefore not possible to draw any firm conclusions about the cost effectiveness of homeopathy based on existing evidence. We've then moved on to offer some recommendations for future research, which includes that participants and treatment should be representative. So the participants that are included in studies should be comparable to participants in the populations you want to compare to. Treatments should be representative, so that the treatment that's offered in the studies should be similar to the treatment that patients may expect in real-world practice. What can be done should be done in order to reduce bias, and I'm not going to go into details here, but just refer you to Cochrane's guidelines for assessing risk of bias. And the time horizon should be at least 12 months, and researchers are recommended to use validated outcome measures, so that increases the reliability, the confidence in your results if you want, and it also makes the studies comparable to other studies. We also suggest outcomes should be combined into a single index. And what I mean by this, I'll show you an example. This is the front page of the questionnaire that we are using as part of the research that I'm currently carrying out in the UK. It's a study looking at patients suffering from depression and comparing the results of these patients treated homeopathically with patients who do not receive homeopathic treatment. And I'd like to take the opportunity here to actually thank the Swedish Association for Scientific Research and the Swedish Academy for Classical Homeopathy for their financial support to this project. So many thanks for that. It's greatly appreciated. In this study, we've included, it's a 6-page questionnaire, including the front page, and then one of the pages has this questionnaire, which is EQ5D. And as you see, this is a questionnaire where we're asking patients to say something about their mobility, self-care, their usual activities, pain, discomfort, anxiety, and depression. And this outcome measure, which is reasonably fairly easy to complete, is used in economics research to make an assessment of the cost effectiveness of treatments. So, and it's free to use. There's no cost involved. We have recommended that when researchers assess the cost effectiveness of treatments and report costs, they should include direct healthcare costs, including medication, consultations, hospital, and other care costs. They should report direct non-healthcare costs such as transportation and care provided by family, and indirect costs such as work absenteeism, reduced productivity, and premature mortality, for instance. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Petter. Questions for Petter? Can I ask you a question? This MIMOP, it's quite, well, it's quite used a lot in England, isn't it? To evaluate the outcome of patient treatment with homeopathy. And can you say something about that? Is it used in Norway, anything, or?
Well, we've translated it into Norwegian now, because obviously you need a national language version, so hopefully practitioners will be using it, and we'll also assess it. And also there is a Europe-wide initiative which is called Making Cases Count. So if you Google Making Cases Count, you'll find a website which encourages homeopaths to collect data in their everyday practice. And the project Making Cases Count can offer you support. So offer you some advice on how you can use this outcome measure, or if you want to, you can use other outcome measures and they'll help you with analysis of data, etc., etc. So really recommend you to take a look at that. But MIMOP, Measure Yourself Medical Outcome Profile, MIMOP is the #1 recommended outcome measure as part of Making Cases Count.
I have translated into Swedish, and if the Swedish homeopaths are interested, I can put it on our school's website, so you can all go there and get it. So I just put it on there, and you go into the website and get it.
Hello. I just have a question, which I see also in most of this research is based on the homeopaths themselves. Do you know, of your knowledge, are there any research which include both medical practitioners and homeopaths, which they together, because you can see the bias in this is that the people who go to homeopaths, they are more concerned of the health, and this means that this is a bias. But how is it possible, or do you know about anybody doing a research together with conventional practices and homeopaths, where they try to just to make a study?
I'm not sure I understand exactly your question, but I mean, if there are some of these studies were randomized controlled trials, and there are researchers then which are assessing the results, and in the study that we're carrying out now in Sheffield, we are sending questionnaires directly to patients, so practitioners are not involved in any sort of assessment, and we are receiving the results from patients, and they're either treated with homeopathy or usual care alone. So then it's the researchers who make the assessment, and they do it blinded. So when I analyze the results, I'm not going to know whether these were homeopathically treated patients or conventionally treated patients.
What I'm thinking about is more like two researchers, one medical practitioners and one homeopath going together, for instance, asking for people who suffer from a certain...
So you're talking more about qualitative research then, or...?
No, quantitative. That you ask, for instance, you can find in a newspaper that the medical, also a researcher is applying, do you have any problem with your bladder, for instance, please contact us, we're going to do a study, something like this. Because then you can do a study together with a...
I think it's more about the reliability of the research and the way in which the research has been carried out. So if you are doing studies such as the one we are carrying out, where the practitioners are not involved in the assessment, but the researchers do the assessment, and they do it blinded, so they don't know which group the patients are in, then you would get a more objective assessment of the results, because I think that's what you're looking for, a non-biased assessment. Yes. And you will get that if you do a randomized trial where the assessors are blinded.
Questions?
I just have a comment to your question, because I think what you're, Frau Musia from NAFCAM, I think what you're asking at is a very principled problem. You have addressed that all a little bit yesterday already, is that patients select themselves according to their preferences. There's nothing you can do about it. That's real life. We just have to accept it. And in my opinion, there's nothing bad about it. It just calls for a modification of the paradigms that we use. But that is nothing particular for homeopathy, that you have in many, many, many different treatment forms, and especially in CAM. So I think your question is absolutely right and appropriate. What do we do? That we have patients who choose homeopathy have certain characteristics. We cannot get away with it. We cannot randomize these patients, because if we randomize these patients, we run into problems that are even worse than what you described. Because you have patients in the homeopathy group who are really opposing homeopathy, and you have patients in the conventional group who really, really want to have homeopathy. And that's much worse. So it's more about how do we handle that situation and make good research still possible, instead of us trying to solve that problem. And I saw in your review that you ran in these problems, of course, also too, but I mean the ways of handling that.
I was just going to say, I think you should explain a bit the cohort design, because it really answers this question. Because you can... Yeah,
it does to a certain extent. I mean, the project that we're running in Sheffield now, it's using a methodology called the cohort multiple randomized control design. And the design is developed in such a way where about 30 general practitioners in the South Yorkshire area have recruited patients to participate in this cohort. And it basically just means that these patients have agreed that they can be contacted again for research purposes. That's just the general thing. So it could be any type of research. It could be on depression, or it could be on any type of condition. It could be to do a randomized controlled trial. It could be to do qualitative research, whatever. And then these patients have completed a questionnaire where 6,000 out of 30,000 so far have indicated that they're suffering from either moderate or strong anxiety or depression. And these are then sent this questionnaire. So we're sending the questionnaire to 6,000, and then they're returning the questionnaire. They don't know that there is a homeopathy study going on. And then we are making a random selection of these. 162 are then offered homeopathy, and then the result is compared to those who are not offered homeopathy. But still, you have the problem that Frauke is pointing out, because in the homeopathy group, patients who don't like homeopathy will not accept the offer. So we've reduced the problem, but it's still there. You can't completely get away with it. But it's at least an attempt at trying to reduce the problem. And hopefully, what also happens in a regular randomized controlled trial, patients will be asked, would you like to participate in this trial of either homeopathy or placebo, for instance? In our trial, we're not using placebo. And then patients say, oh, yeah. Oh, I'd like homeopathy. And then they get randomized to placebo, and then they don't want to participate, so they drop out. So that's a big problem in randomized controlled trials.
Questions? We have time for more questions. Okay, Petter, thank you very much.
Yeah.